You know, some of the biggest monsters really are just transformed men. Before we hop into this list of my top 5 Magi villains, please do me a favor, leave your own list in the comment section down below, leave a like, and subscribe if you haven't already. Now, let's get into it. What's up guys, I've got the pencil here, and here we are to talk about the top 5 villains. Here we are to rank my top 5 villains from Magi. Now, I could have done all the villains, but I don't think every single villain has really enough to talk about. There are a lot of minor villains in Magi, some that literally show up for one fight, get body bagged, and we never see them again. So I wasn't going to talk about all of them, so I decided to limit myself to my top 5 for their own individual reasons. And let's hop into number 5. Judar is fun, and here's the thing, when I think about villains from Magi, I initially wasn't going to put Judar on the list, because, you know, he has his little sort of redemption arc, but unlike Hakuryu, it's not necessarily a redemption arc. Like, Judar was the same megalomaniac, power-hungry, I don't really care about anything but my own desires kind of person all the way until the very end. And I think it works very, very well going off of his introduction. I think Judar's introduction as this dark Magi, like really the outlier even in comparison to the other 3 Magi who actually do care about their respective peoples and nations, Judar was just there for the vibe. And the vibe was destruction. And I like that. He presents this sort of dark mirror image to Aladdin, and quite literally since they do kind of look alike, they both have the same extended hair thing, they both wield magic, they're both Magis, but they are literally, Judar is that dark mirror version of our main character that shows where Aladdin could fall to, where Aladdin could go. And I think that's very important to show for a character like Aladdin, because he's so powerful, because due to his very nature, he is a danger to the world if he ever were to go like this. His landing in the Balbad arc, when he just shows up and says, "Hi everybody," everyone dies, and just proceeds to almost murder everyone with some ice shards. Like, it's a powerful introductory scene, mainly for the fact that we really had no context. We knew he existed. Up to that point, we knew there were other Magi, but at the same time, we never really got to the scale of how powerful they could be. And when you think about it, we really got introduced to the 2 weakest Magi first, because take a quick look at what Sherazard did, and take a quick look at what Yunnan can do, and these 2 baby Magi don't really seem that much. They're both extremely young, and honestly, extremely inexperienced. But for what Judar did upon his introduction, simply just pooping all over Aladdin, like Aladdin thought he was something. You know, he was pretty darn powerful. He didn't really struggle too much up to that point, but no, Judar showed up and said, "Ha ha ha ha, you forgot, you're not the main character here. It's Alibaba. Wrong arc, buddy," and straight up pulled up and washed Aladdin so hard that Ugo straight up said, "Hold on a second. Well, time for murder," and almost killed Judar. Judar had to be saved. And in my opinion, Judar as a villain, he sort of lacks the same presence he had in his intro, because once you see your villain get bullied like that, no matter how intimidating or how powerful he becomes, like legitimately, Judar becomes extremely powerful, especially towards the more middle part of the narrative. Like when he fights Aladdin in the rematch, and Aladdin realizes, oh my, he literally absorbed every last bit of Dark Ruth, all the Black Ruth that was chilling for Ilala to come down. I need to send him out of the tent. Like, Aladdin resorted to literal murder. Like, Aladdin, the pacifist, well, not necessarily pacifist, but Aladdin, I don't want to kill anybody. Please spare people. Like, all of his ideas during the Magastat War were, please, I don't want to kill anybody. I don't want people to die en masse. He took one look at Judar and said, no, I have to execute you. But in terms of that sheer presence, I think Judar is weakened after his intro, because due to him becoming a bit more like down to earth, not in the sense that he lost any of his arrogance, but he was more down to earth as a villain that we could really perceive and understand and know as an individual. He sort of lost a lot of his threatening air. And I love that he's an instigator. He literally just pokes certain people along. Like, he was the one who took Hakuryu and said, oh yeah, do it. I'll provide you all the power you need to kill Arba or Gyoken. I'll help you out, whatever you want. I just want to see the world burn. And I just want to destroy the world. Like, literally, Judar's entire ideology of this world's broken. It made me, and no matter what other happy life I could have lived, I don't care, because I just want to end it all. I like that. However, as a villain, due to him constantly being more so of an instigator rather than a plot driver, Judar is a very reactionary character, and as much as I do like certain reactionary characters, I do prefer characters that are legitimately proactive. And Judar technically is proactive. He went out there and absorbed all the Black Ruth. However, I think to the degree that I like my proactivity in a villain, and I like my presence and intimidating terror with a villain, I think that Judar, he's sort of lacking this a little bit. If he had kept up that same, in my mind, if Ugo hadn't body bagged Judar to the point where he had to be saved by Kogyoku and friends, I think I would have way more respect for him as a villain. But up until that point, after that point, he sort of, he falls off. He has his moments. Like, I believe him opening the third eye was really, really cool. But outside of that, purely as a villain, he sort of falls off. I still think he's a fantastic character. I'm definitely going to go into Judar more in depth when I finally talk about him in his own video. But as a villain specifically, he does good, but there's others who do it better. And speaking of people who do it better, let's move on to number 4. David is a threat. Can I even say his full name? Hold on, I'm gonna try and say his full name. Never mind, I'm not gonna try and say his full name. I have no idea how to pronounce the middle one. But David Abraham. My man's a menace of completely different level. Okay, here's the thing. I like David a lot, mainly because he's a villain that's sort of beyond our comprehension, in the sense that he's beyond even the comprehension of the people in his world, because he's a singularity. He sees fate, he understands fate, he's completely willing to rock with it to the very end. And I think that makes him inherently a bit more terrifying than your average villain that we understand the full motivations for. He does really good at being literally just a menace. 100%, like, there's no real logical reason that he's the way he is, other than the fact that, oh, I want to rule the world, but not just a world, I want to rule an entire universe, and he wants to do that, and I can respect that. I won't knock the hustle, David. But however, did you have to kill everybody, though? Like, couldn't you have at least, wow. But the thing that David does is that, due to him literally knowing everything, that entire one chapter that's literally just his prophetic writings, that's just a constant, I don't know, my attention span must have just disappeared over the years of reading manga, because it took all my willpower to read that entire 2-page spread. But as I read it, I got to peer into his mind, and seeing this man who really just is completely disconnected from the actual world he lives in. He literally talks about how he wasn't expecting to have a son, but he realized due to fate he needs to have a son, and you can just see how David's eyes, those empty, soulless eyes, are the ones that view the world, are just like, this is not my end. This is not the finish. I need to know why. I need to know how. I want to grow. One of my favorite moments is when we flash back to young David, and one of his questions are, what are magic? What are magicians? And why was I chosen? You can see that while everyone else is reveling in the fact that we have this new power, we can rule the world, we can do all this stuff, David's instantly asking questions. He's inquisitive. He wants to know, and he wants to become more. I like villains that, in a sense, understand their station, but reject their station at the same time. David gives me a lot of Father from Full Metal Alchemist vibes in the complete sense. However, while Father from Full Metal Alchemist was more so acting on a hunch, like he wasn't entirely sure if he could actually do what he wanted to do, David, due to his ability to see the waves of fate themselves, he understood everything, and he was able to act and pre-plan accordingly. The birth of Solomon, to the rebellion against fate itself, all the way to the murder of the entire resistance, to turning certain people against his son. All this different work that David did as an individual, all just to achieve what he wanted. He was the only person sealed off in the dimension with Ilallah who did not give up hope. He knew exactly what was going to happen. Sure, it may have taken years, may have taken decades. Heck, in terms of Alibaba, if we're going off what he said, considering how technically short his life was within that world, it could have taken centuries, if not millennia, for David to return. However, he still kept up that big energy. He said, I'm going to return. A new singularity is going to be born. I'm going to reincarnate through him, and I'm going to live my good life. Y'all, deuces. And then when he finally did it, it shows that David is, once again, what I like about him is that extra dimensional ideology, that thing that's beyond human comprehension. But that big strength of his is also his biggest weakness. But also his real biggest weakness is the fact that the man has no eyebrows. Golly gee, whitlookers does this man look awkward. Like, he looks fine when he's younger, but 40-year-old David with no eyebrows, it just looks like, I'm not gonna lie, it just looks like the mangaka forgot to draw them. Like, no, I'm kidding. He still has a really good design, but the no eyebrows, every time I look at that image, throws me off. I'm not even, like, breaking meta for a second. I was going to draw the David image that you all know, like the one that pops up in the wiki, the one that pops up when you first see him, but I really prefer the younger David design, because the older David design, no eyebrows, it just messes with my head. But back to real meta, the thing is, I don't think David's motivations are strong enough. Like, Aladdin literally exposes his grandfather on this. Like, he's like, what are you doing this for? Because of fate. But don't you want to destroy fate? Well, yes, but you're doing it because fate. And like, Aladdin psychologically analyzes David and literally just pokes every single possible hole there is to possibly be within David's ideology, and David just has no answer. Man's literally a nigh omnipotent being at the moment, and he still just has no answer to what Aladdin's saying, because he realizes that, oh yeah, despite me asking all these questions, I'm kind of empty on the inside. And while that's good for it's good for the hero's perspective because it shows why they're right and he's wrong, it takes what was a really intimidating, beyond comprehension villain, and it kind of not necessarily babies them down, but it weakens their presence. Like, it makes it so that David isn't as intimidating because David didn't really have a plan. He was just following the ways of fate. He saw it, but he still wrote it. That's the thing. David still believed that, oh, fate's unbreakable, I must follow it all the way through, but he didn't necessarily have his own ideology, his own thoughts and beliefs. He was just following fate. And that makes him a lot less interesting. So that's where David locks himself in at number 4. I still think he's great. I still think his design is fire. I especially like his godly design. I think it's very, very cool. I love how he interacts with basically all the other godly beings, like the way he interacts with Sinbad, the way he interacts with Ugo, even the way he interacts with Arba. I like all that stuff. However, he still is held back just a little tad bit by that ending. If he had actual solid motivations, then he would be higher. But at the moment, he does not get the chef's kiss. He gets the chef's snap. That's about it. But let's move on to number 3. Arba is a monster, and I love it. Here's the thing. Arba is the most present villain out of like all of our big, bad endgame villains. Arba is the most present, as she's Gyoken, as she's Arba, as she's everybody. She's even Hakuei. She's every single person you could ever think. The leader of Althalman, the menace herself. Arba is a beast, and I respect it. Here's the thing. I like Arba a lot because of what Arba does for the narrative. Like, a whole bunch of characters, the whole entire story reasonably would not exist without Arba. You gotta realize that. Arba, while David is the catalyst that led to the destruction of Al-Matoran, through getting Sinbad to go and meet Ilala and destroy him and absorb him and recreate the roof, I think that in terms of the actual modern narrative, if Arba did not exist with her insane drive to go meet her father, then I think we wouldn't have a narrative. Because you gotta realize, Ugo only sent Aladdin down to the real world because of Althalman. And Althalman wouldn't exist without Arba. And without Arba, Ren Hakuryu couldn't exist. And a whole bunch of things, the Koa Empire wouldn't exist. There are so many things that Arba is the catalyst for, and I love that. And the other thing that I love about Arba is that she's an existential threat beyond all means and logic. Here's the thing. Her obsession with her father is a bit concerning. And by a bit, I mean very. And by very, I mean extremely. But the thing about that is, due to making her obsession so, like, palpable, that's literally such a deep intertwined part of her character, that trying to separate her from the idea of her father, trying to separate her from the idea of that voice, is basically impossible, basically making her unable to be reasoned with. Here's the thing. You couldn't really talk to Arba. Arba was just gonna kill you if things came down to it. David would talk to you. Sure, he would still be trying to kill you. He'd still be trying to take you over. But look at what happened when he was talking with Ugo. He was trying to talk to Ugo. He's like, darn, this is an interesting prospect. Talk to me, Ugo. We can be friends. And you take a look at someone like Judar. Judar was all about the talking after a while. He was willing to communicate. You just look at went to Arba. Arba didn't care about communication. The only communication was the communication of her blade to your neck so your head comes off. And I love that because due to that fact, she's an existential, immortal monster. As Yunnan says, she's unbelievably powerful to a degree that it's really concerning, but you know why. She's been around for over 1,000 years. She's literally older than Yunnan himself and has been doing nothing but attaining knowledge, attaining power. And we gotta realize, Arba's even older than that. Even in terms of Al-Matoran, she had been keeping herself young, but other than that, Arba's way, way, way older because of where she comes from. She is one of David's original creations to look over Solomon. And stuff like that, it's Arba's backstory, intriguing. Wish we got more of that. I want to know, and that's the thing. I'm glad we don't have answers to it because some things don't need answers. Read Attack on Titan. You're going to find out a lot of things don't need answers. But in terms of Arba, like her relationship to her father, to the voice in her head, what was she hearing? Because everyone who's seen Ilallah completely agrees that thing, it may have desires, it wants to create its own universe, but even then, that's mainly the desires of David intermingled into Ilallah. What the real question is, was the voice always David? Because Ilallah was always, this is the common consensus from everyone who's seen it, it's just a lump of power. It doesn't necessarily have thoughts and wills and dreams. Was the voice fake? Was the voice David? Was the voice something Arba conjured up to give herself purpose? We don't know, we'll never know, and that's the great thing about it, because it makes Arba this really existential threat that you can't fully understand. You cannot reason with it, you simply must fight it off. Hakuryu needed to fight it off. Judar needed to fight it off. Everybody had to fight it off. But the only thing that keeps Arba from going any higher, because initially, I'm going to be completely real with y'all, Arba was my number one. Like when I was after my first reread of the, not my first reread, after my first read-through of the series, Arba was number one. Then I reread the series again, and I realized what holds Arba back is the fact that her conclusion is sort of weak. It's sort of spotty. Same thing with David, as in the sense that once she's not a villain anymore, once she gets body bagged by a newly amped Aladdin, her and her entire organization that was this big existential threat that everyone had to train for, her getting body bagged so easily really just ruins her presence as a villain. It just absolutely destroys it, and her conclusion of just like flying around the world in her child form, just being done with life because, you know, she's not going to get what she wanted. She can't hear his voice anymore. It's a very soft conclusion that just doesn't do it for me as an individual. I love Arba all the way up till her end. Once she ends, then it becomes a problem. I just don't think it holds the same presence that Arba did. And I think her conclusion was a bit too rushed. At least in my mind, it was a bit too rushed. But I can definitely see what people could say Arba's the best villain, because I initially thought it too. But let's talk about Arba no more. Let's move on to number 2. Kasim, you were so close, buddy. You were so close, Kasim. I'm telling you. Ask me tomorrow. Ask me tomorrow. I'm telling you. Tomorrow, on Wednesday, just comment on this video and be like, hey, yo, do you like Kasim more than number 1? And I may say yes. I'm not even gonna lie, because I love Kasim for what Kasim is. Here's the thing, I do love my existential threats, those beings that are just beings because beings, like they're villains because their motivations are beyond our understanding, or because they hate the world, such as Judar, such as David, such as Arba. They're just monsters beyond our comprehension, and there's no point in reasoning with them. But the villains that terrify me the most are the ones that were men, and these men that happen to take up the top 2 spots. But Kasim especially, I love their narratives, mainly because you can understand where they come from by fully understanding Kasim's backstory. I'm talking like number 1 and number 2 are like a same group, but basically, in my mind, they are kind of interchangeable. The only reason Kasim's falling a little bit lower is because of my recent reread. But the Kasim arc and how he manipulates people, how he's willing to do all these dark deeds, how he's willing to do all this, and you find out it's out of jealousy. It's out of just grief and regret and hatred that Ali Baba was something that he wasn't. Kasim literally suffered throughout his entire life, grew up in the slums, lost his parents, had to kill his own father, had to do all these dark deeds, only for his own younger sister to still die, only for Ali Baba to reveal to be this secret prince who happens to be the son of the king, gets to move up and live the happy high life, while all Kasim gets to do is stay in the streets and struggle, living for his life and fighting for his life at every single opportunity. As much as I don't like Kasim for being what he was, a villain that was willing to harm and attack people and even betray his own friends and manipulate his own group, all for the sake of power because he was jealous of his friend, I completely understand why he was jealous of Ali Baba. It makes perfect sense to me why he believes the world is unfair, why he thinks that he needs to right the wrongs of his life, because, to be fair, Kasim really got the short end of the stick. And by the short end of the stick, I mean he didn't get a stick. That's what I mean. He went through so much suffering, and for what? For nothing. For absolutely nothing. He worked so hard in life. He did all this stuff, fighting for his sister, fighting for his own life, fighting with Ali Baba, doing all this just for nothing. And to see him struggle so much, and to see him fall to darkness, literally becoming a tool of Al-Thalman, being able to become the first black jinn we ever see, and him becoming a pure monster, I think what makes it work so well is that Kasim is a villain that I can 100% get behind the motivations of. While I don't like the jealousy, that's the one thing that holds him back. The fact that he got mad, I'm not mad that he got mad at Ali Baba for just being this lucky secret golden child. I'm not mad that he's upset about that. I'm mad that instead of trying to figure out what he could do to get Alibaba's favor, to get him some help out and to help his people out, he rather decided to just avoid his problems mainly and just blame everything. Oh no, Alibaba, no, this is all your fault, and I can't believe you are lucky and I'm not, and thusly I'm gonna kill you and everybody else. That's the only issue I have with Kasim. But otherwise, from his character design to his abilities to his relationship with Alibaba to the fact that Kasim died, but his Ruth is what mixed with Alibaba's and gave him this new, different sort of presence to him because they are fundamentally tied together as brothers should be. I love that. It's a really beautiful narrative. I'm going to talk about Kasim more in depth in his own video. I'm definitely going to do just a complete narrative analysis on Kasim, which works really, really well since he mainly appears in the first arc and the rest of him is just subcontext and like motivation for Alibaba in the future. But yeah, I love Kasim. I think he does great. However, he is not our number one villain. You want to know who is our number one villain? Let's find out. Matal Mogamet is a menace of the highest caliber. He is a monster among monsters, but unlike Kasim, who I believe has one problem that is justifiable and inherently human, I fully understand where Matal comes from. He comes from a background and understanding that he and the Goy, he and the non-magic wielders are fundamentally different beings. They are fundamentally different people. And through that, they cannot coexist in the way that he always wanted them to. He once believed that the magicians served the Goy. He believed that if he could help them, if he could raise them up, if he could make them better, then he would be doing his job properly. But through constant negative reinforcement, through the constant suffering, the loss of his family, the suffering of his people, it just kept gnawing away at him. He kept losing himself personally. And to see that technically, even before he goes full villain mode and becomes the medium, the fuel for the birth of Ilalah's descent and the destruction of everything, even before that, he was technically already a monster. Because let's be real, as happy, quote unquote, as the Goy were that they were living in the underground city being nothing but Magoi fuel, all that was basically a cage for humans. That's like putting humans in a power plant and having them run on treadmills. But no, don't worry, they're fed and watered. They can take breaks from the treadmills every once in a while. That's perfectly fine. You can tell that Matal had already fallen to darkness, but the constant negative reinforcement of the Goy, constant threats of war and destruction from all these people that he viewed as lesser after all they had done to him. This once again comes down to the Kasim problem. I fully understand where Matal comes from. Like, his worldview is something that I completely get, because he tried for so many years to work with the Goy, to work with those who couldn't wield magic, to try and help them. He was a good guy for the longest time. He had so much faith, but understandably so, the loss of his daughter, the suffering of his people, it broke him. It broke him like it would break any human being. Matal Mogamet is a human being first and foremost, except when you can see the human being, you completely understand where the monster comes from. Because it's all the negativity that lies within his humanity. It's all the things that he's gone through and suffered with that made the monster that we know today. The man known as Matal Mogamet is not a person born of just, I want to be evil because I was raised to be evil in the sense of Judar. I want to be evil because I see the fate of the future and I need to be evil in the sense of David. He's not, I want to be evil because my dad said so in the case of Arba. He's not, I want to be evil because I'm a bit jealous in the sense of Kasim. I'm going to be evil because it's the only way I can protect my people. It's the only way he viewed that would fix the problems of the world. He did his best to try and do everything he could to prove the Goy wrong. That he was sick and tired of their suffering. He was sick and tired of both sides constantly struggling against each other. And he was going to fix it all by killing them all. He was going to get rid of them. He was going to erase them. He was basically going off the old philosophy of some of the humans from Almatoran. When you think about it, he was like, oh, well, if we get rid of the other species, the lesser species, then we'll be perfectly fine. We'll live perfectly happily. And while that's a dark, unbelievably deep and dark, disturbing ideology, after what he's been through, I can completely understand it. And I gotta go more in depth in him in his own video. Like, I feel bad whenever I do these top fives and when I haven't talked about them in individual videos yet, because there's so much I want to say about them. But then if I were to really go fully in depth, these videos would be an hour long, and they're only like half an hour long. And I know they're difficult to watch, but this is me literally just expressing how much I love these villains. I think all these villains are fantastic villains. Despite my little problems with them, I think they're all great. And honestly, can't wait to talk about them in their own videos, because I'm pretty sure every single person on this list is getting a video. Maybe not in this month, but definitely sometime down the line. I'm talking about every last one of these people more in depth. But tell me, once again, what do you guys think? Do you think my list is good? Do you think my list is whack? Do you think Sinbad or Hakuryu should be here? I don't know. Tell me what you guys think. I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Please tell me what you guys think. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That Guy with the Pencil, writing off.